The culmination of interplay here at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity is the performance of the operatic rendering of The Handmaid's Tale happening here in the Jenny Belsberg Theatre. The opera was originally written by the composer Poul Ruders in the late 1990s, but here at Interplay we have been experimenting with different sizes of ensembles, different ways in which to tell the story, and none of that would be possible without reimagining what the music might look like. The person responsible for that reimagining is Daniel Schlosberg, who joins me here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Let's maybe go all the way back. When did this project first capture your interest, and why did it capture your interest?
Well, 2 years ago, actually, I was here at Banff working on an opera that was going to be at Prototype Festival. I was just doing electronics, actually, and I think I met Joel and Emil, who were telling me about this project that they hoped to do a new orchestration for. And I said, well, that's funny because actually that's what I do mostly in my real life. So not electronics. I was really excited by the idea. I knew Poul Ruders' work and did not know the piece, but was really intrigued by the notion of condensing a contemporary piece for full orchestra just to a chamber size.
So let's contextualize you for a bit here as well, because a lot of your work, as you just said, helps to reimagine operatic music for different types of venues, especially with your work with Heartbeat Opera in New York City. What is the first thing that you're looking at when you see a score that either has existed for maybe 20 years in the case of Poul Ruders, but also could have existed for hundreds of years? As you look at that for the first time, what is something that you are looking for to say, this can be changed, this can be pared down, this can be given to this thing? What's the process there?
Well, it really depends on the score. If I'm looking at a classic score, often I know the piece very well, or at least I've been very familiar with it, and it kind of exists in my imagination, and that's kind of where I start. I'm like, okay, how does Carmen, which I know so well, how does that want to feel on stage, and how does that want to render musically? But for a piece like this, which I don't know, it's exciting because I need to listen to it. I need to get a sense of the breadth of the musical ideas and of like the dramatic thrust of the piece. But then I stop. I don't want to let that infuse my imagination too much. So then I start looking at the score, and I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, well, this is a huge orchestra. So how? And the question I ask myself always is, for a more contemporary piece, is very different from an older piece, which we've heard thousands of times. Like we've heard Carmen thousands of times, we've heard La Boheme thousands of times. But this piece, I feel a duty to because basically most of the people who are coming to listen to this have never heard it. So I do want to communicate when I'm doing a reduction and a new orchestration for this type of thing. I do want to communicate the essence of the work, as well as make it sound as amazing as I can for a small group.
So when you're talking about that essence, when it comes to the original score of The Handmaid's Tale by Poul Ruders, what struck you about what the essence of this music is, and then how do you distill it for a performance here in Banff?
The Handmaid's Tale is quite an epic score. It is harrowing. It contains insane, humongous sonorities played by the full orchestra, and also very, very delicate soloistic elements. And so I chose the ensemble, which is 16 players, to kind of reflect the breadth of timbre, as big of a range as I could possibly find. The couple of kind of interesting things I did with it were, he originally orchestrated for triple winds, which would mean 3 flutists, 3 oboes, 3 cornetists, whatever, 3 bassoonists. And a full brass section, horn, trumpet, trombone, multiple of them, as well as harp and 5 percussion. It's crazy, huge string section. So I looked at the writing and I was like, okay, well, I knew I'm gonna have to have winds, and so I chose to have 4 winds. But instead of bassoon, I substituted another clarinetist because I felt like the bass clarinet plus adding 2 B flat or A clarinets would provide the virtuosity. Bassoon for me, for this particular piece, has a little more of a tight tone color, and so clarinet for me gives a lot more options in terms of range, and sound, as well as in the strings. So normally you would have, 2 violins, viola, cello, and bass, but I decided that yes, of course, we do need 2 violins and viola sound at certain moments, but his sonic texture is often so high and just exists like in the really high partials of the harmonic series. So I had a violist who then would also double violin. So we have the option of 3 violins or 2 violins and viola. So that would give, I think, that for me would capture his music.
For all those musical changes, how do you think that this size of orchestra, this size of ensemble, because it's not even just about the size of the orchestra, it's about the amount of singers that are on the stage as well. How do you think that an ensemble of this size maybe shares the story of The Handmaid's Tale in maybe a different way than this sort of large-scale piece that Ruders initially shared in the late 90s? Or is it different?
I think it is. I think I'm personally a huge proponent of intimacy in theater, and that's kind of what I love to do with how I orchestrate. But in terms of on stage, this piece originally had a huge chorus, like how many huge choruses and whatever. But it's epic in a way. But when you're paring it down and putting it on a smaller stage for a smaller audience, like it's really important that the audience connects with people individually. And I feel like this story is such a dramatic piece that can be told in the context of like one woman's journey and her emotion and we really spotlight her in this version, and the other characters are kind of all circling around. And I think this heightens that in a way, and I think it's really compelling.
How, when you're looking at a large-scale opera like this was, what's the challenge in finding intimacy in something that is so large, filled with bombast and all these grand opera emotions? What's the process like to find the smaller, more one-on-one, intimate moments?
Well, I think Brenna did an amazing job, and as well as Kamna, the wonderful conductor. But ultimately, opera is about human emotion, and that can be communicated in so many different ways. And this on a different stage, this type of thing would just be dwarfed by the size of the stage. But I think that when we're in a small space and we're able to focus on the people and actually see their faces, like that's huge. Like when you're at the Met, like you can't see them. So, and that's a whole different type of experience, but if this were to be done there, obviously. But when you can see their face and see what they're going through, I think it's as, if not more compelling than, just witnessing a kind of faceless mass. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this work also has been the fact that it has not stayed static from your initial changes. Even throughout the rehearsal process, there have been different sorts of approaches, different advice given by Kamna Gupta, who is the conductor for this production. How does actually seeing something come to life that you have arranged, how does that process strike your ear compared to when you're initially doing it? And what sorts of things, when you're listening to it, how do you approach the idea that something could change?
Well, I mean, it's always an experiment with this type of thing. I treat it completely as like, wow, is this going to work? It's always a kind of a hope and a prayer. But last year when we did a shorter workshop of it, I was thrilled to hear it because it was achieving what I wanted for it. It sounded big, it sounded huge, it sounded crazy, it sounded wild, it sounded all of his colors, Poul's colors originally in the score, in a leaner version, and I felt like it was really compelling. So that was exciting to me. And of course there were some questions about how do we handle the chorus. Like there was an idea about using a click track and kind of or like having the flashbacks be all video. There's a lot of crazy ideas, and I think ultimately Kamna and I felt that it's just better to do it with the people we have on stage and essentialize it in that way and match the size of the orchestra in a way with the singers rather than trying to use a lot of technology, which might be confusing if other opera companies were to do this. and just have it all be there and be this chamber version that exists that you can do with 19 singers and 16 players. I think it's coming off quite wonderfully.
What do you hope the next steps for this work will be as it perhaps travels outside of Banff?
Yeah, I hope everyone does this. I think that major opera companies, big opera companies with huge halls, should do the original version. But this now becomes available to smaller companies, which is very exciting to me. And this story needs to be told more than ever, especially in the United States, which is where I live, and my country, which maybe companies won't be bold enough to do it. But I encourage everyone to take the risk, because the fact that people might balk at doing this story means that it needs to be done more than ever.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Daniel Schlosberg, thank you so much for taking the time, and all the best for the run of performances here at the Banff Centre.
Thank you so much.